Well, John sent me a script for opening night. I was in New York. I had started a distribution company for us called Faces Distribution. We started with distributing Woman Under the Influence, and we went to Chinese Bookie. And on opening night, he sent me the script, told me he wanted to do it. And I don't remember the year it was, but I went out to California and got involved. And so I produced it, and I was the cameraman on it. John was involved with every facet of filmmaking, from the designing of the sets, to the clothes that people wore, to the makeup, which he disliked intensely. He'd have actors go wash their faces after they were made up to come back, and everything had to pass his inspection. You know, we'd have show and tell, where you got to just show all the props, do all the stuff, but he would make it so that you had to come up with the material, do the lighting, build the sets, do everything. He'd talk about it with whoever's department it was, but he expected them to come up with the ideas and how to put it together and eventually what it looked like. He really wanted you to read the script, know what was going on, form your own conclusions, because somehow that may, by your own interpretation, add something to what we were doing that he didn't think of to begin with. John never told me how he wanted the scene lit. Early on, we had some problems talking to one another, because John was the master at doublespeak. He could talk to you. You could go to him and ask him a question, and he could talk for 10 minutes. You'd forget the question that you asked. You wouldn't understand what you were talking about. It would always be interesting, but you'd never get an answer. So early on, I would say to him, John, how do you want this, what's the scene? What do you want it to look like? Shall I light it this way, that way? What's the contrast? Stuff like that. Never worked. So finally, I realized that I would just break it down. I said, okay, just give me the emotional content of the scene. Are they in love? Is this a romantic moment? Is this drama? Just give me a little hint as to what the expectation out of the scene is going to be. And so that's the way we talked. And I would light it, and if he didn't like it, I would change it. But he would seldom ever change the way I lit it. I think he had no expectation of what it should look like. So he was constantly wanting to be pleased or surprised, which, for a person like myself, helps, because then I do it according to the way I like. He was a taskmaster. And I'll give you an example, is that I'll move up to the first day of shooting. We're in the theater, and we had the set was built. We had flyaway walls, and John came to me and said, Al, he said, we're going to start this shot with Jenna and John Finnegan, and it's going to be dark. They're going to come out of their dressing room and be in this dark area. I said, okay. And he said, but I'd like to pan when she goes down backstage behind the wall and be able to see them down there. I said, okay. But we're not finished, he said. Then I'd like to look through this bathroom and see on stage, and also, by the way, see the audience behind it. He says, oh, and don't forget, we're going to fly the walls for the scene change. He said, how long will it take? I said, about an hour and a half. Okay. About 30 minutes later, he came to me and said, what the hell is taking so long? I said, John, you want it, you're going to get it, but it takes time. And so every 10 or 15 minutes, he would just complain about the length of time it took to do the shot. Like always, it's the actors that have to wait for everybody else. And I said, well, that's life. But it was exciting because you always felt like you were involved in the creation of something, And I believe that everybody has a desire for a sense of satisfaction of working on a piece of material that really made you feel good, that your involvement was critical. And that goes for everybody that worked on the crew. And I think that chief among John's abilities was to create that atmosphere where everybody wanted to come to work, each and every day. The crew loved John Cassavetes because he was always on. He was exciting. He was always demanding. They knew what they were in for. We had a number of the crew would work on each of the pictures. They'd come back, want to work. And they never really made any money. You know, we couldn't afford to pay them very much. I mean, to the grips, to the electricians, everyone. Nobody was cheated in the sense that they didn't have a chance to put their work forward. They knew that the film depended upon them, you know, and it wasn't about money. But you never have enough money. On opening night, we did stop, and we had about a 2.5 to 3 week hiatus. Simply, we had run out of money. And John and I had some difficulties at this period. And I went back to New York during this hiatus, be with my family. And I was determined not to come back. And then finally, Ben Gazzara called me, and he said, Al, you have to come back. How could you let somebody else finish your work? And so just the fact that somebody recognized what I had done and said, you should come back, don't let anybody else step on your work or, you know, take over. And so I went back, and it was a long shoot. It was a long shoot and editorial process. We opened it, and the reception was not all that good. And so we had to pull it within a couple of weeks because we didn't have enough money to continue the advertising. And so we figured, okay, we'll pull it, we'll put it on the shelf, and when we accumulate some money, we'll decide whether we want to re-release it. Other than in Europe. In Europe, every film we made was always received wonderfully well. In fact, that's how we financed most of the pictures, by pre-selling territories. There were people who just kept coming back. They knew a good deal when they saw it. So they would license the territory and pay up front. And that's how we financed a good portion of the films. You know, we both came from nowhere. We were uneducated in filmmaking at the beginning. And we've sort of grown up in this business and learned. And learning by experience is both a curse and a blessing. You know, you start off not knowing all the things you're not supposed to do, which is great, you know, because you get to experience it and you begin to realize that a lot of those rules don't necessarily apply. As to direction, I think probably he's one of the better directors that America has ever produced. With John, you know, it was never enough. Many times I would say, John, enough. And he'd always say the same thing, Al, no, not enough.